Thank you so much. And thank you to the CLTD for organizing this, I think, timely and important conference. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. Yesterday, we were addressed by our senior DVC, Prof. Roxana Osman, and she asked us quite an important question that made me rethink and kind of redo my entire address for this morning, but one that I think is worth reflecting on. She asked the question, are we preparing students for our past or their futures? And I think with that in mind, I am going to share the presentation that I've prepared for today, because I do think we need to touch on student success and whether we are preparing our students for the future. Nozuko, can I ask, is my screen visible?
Yes, it is, Prof. And it's
Thank
on
so
presenter mode. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So I think to begin, trying to move my slides, I started thinking about and really considering learning and teaching through the existing infrastructures and supports we have in place at Wits University. And the first is the thinking around the 2033 strategic framework. And on this slide, colleagues, I've just taken some of the aspects of the framework that are very applicable and core to our learning and teaching practices. The framework states quite explicitly that the academic project is at the core of the university, that providing the best teaching and learning environment for our students to succeed is crucial for academic excellence, that the academic experience that we provide at WITS must equip our graduates with the ability to think independently and critically based on reason and logic. That the university is the site of production, generation, and translation of knowledge, and that Africa as a whole needs to produce its own scholars who understand and can leverage the local context to contribute and participate meaningfully in the global academy. And the reason why I'm touching on these, colleagues, is because I think throughout yesterday's presentations, looking at the program for today and tomorrow, we really are hitting these key points of the strategic framework. We really are thinking about the academic environment. We're thinking about what is crucial for student success. We're thinking about the graduates that we're going to produce, but also how are we translating our knowledge in the scholarship of teaching and learning for our graduates? And ultimately, how are we producing on the continent the next generation of leaders, of global thinkers? And I guess this is important when we think about how far we've come in terms of tertiary enrollments, and in the next slide, how far we're going. So this slide is just showing, at least from 1994, where aggregates have kind of been standardized and we don't see as many fluctuations, but most importantly, from 2010, when tertiary education enrollments were at 16.6%, to 2021, where that has increased to 25.2%. So here it was just mentioning large classes and student diversity in classes. These classes are even larger, which means there's even more diversity within our classes. But if we were to project to the future and what we could guess the percentage of our population who are adults, 25 to 65 years old, with a completed or partially completed tertiary education could look like, we're seeing that by 2040, 16.5% of the adult population will have some tertiary education. So they'll have encountered some of our learning and teaching practices. They would have been in some of our classrooms. And while it doesn't seem a significant proportion compared to its current and past rates, this is fairly significant. This jump in numbers is fairly significant. So this has me thinking about, and really, I think one of the main core themes of this conference, and particularly what we're talking about today, and excited for the next session that's going to touch on this as well, which is student success. And student success, according to University South Africa, is not a simplistic one-dimensional measure based on grades and academic accomplishments. This was echoed by our senior DVC yesterday, who challenged us to think about student success in terms of the diversity of our students, in terms of what are the aspirations we have for our students. And again, is supported by our strategic framework at the institution, where excellence underpins all that we do. The framework is people-centered, it is holistic, it does speak to graduates of the future, and again, it just stresses our need to provide this environment for our students to succeed. And to this end, I think at WITS, we're in a very fortunate position to have the WITS institutional framework for student success. This allows us to think about student success not from a single dimension and not from a single role, but from what we can all do and what we all are currently doing, which is another exciting part of today, the conceptual and empirical papers on what people are doing. And I guess just to highlight to some of us who may be unfamiliar or have forgotten a bit about the student success framework, the framework stresses the fact that a student is on a journey with us. The journey starts at the application stage. It then goes through admissions, preparations, registrations, orientation, which we will soon be doing again for 2025. The framework stresses that then it's about the retention of students, making sure that they stay and that they progress through to graduation and onto their career. And we all know that at each of these points, at each of these steps in the student journey, specific support is needed, not just at the application and graduation stage. And so the framework speaks to support as a model that is centered around students. And this is just a snapshot of one of the key areas of the framework, which I won't speak to in too much detail. But if you see, we do speak about students as not always knowing who can provide help for them. They don't always know where to find help. And in many cases, they may not be able to access support when they need it. This came to mind, and why I wanted to include it was because of those students we had with us yesterday. Those very strong, brave students who are able to communicate their needs, but also their challenges. And so I want us all to be reminded of the student at the center of what we're doing and not make the assumptions about our students that may or may not always be true. Colleagues, this you'll find in the framework. It is the model for a student-centered approach at WITS. And you can see that we have, again, the student at the center, but we have everyone supporting the student. There is academic support, health and wellness support, personal development, material needs. And supporting all of these structures or all of these subsectors would be our data analytics. And it was wonderful to have BIS yesterday speaking about what we can do with our data analytics and why we need to do it. Because this all informs better approaches of support for students. This is a systems thinking model. So those of you who are aware of it and familiar with it, I won't need to explain it, but it does speak to the need of the different subsystems to speak to each other and for the student to speak out to the subsystems. With the student success model, though, I mean, we do acknowledge and we do know the limitations of the model, right? We do know that students are not always able to seek help. And in fact, at our institution, their help-seeking behavior is quite poor. They don't seek help as quickly and as often as they need to. And we also know that we cannot individually support every student. So we cannot tailor the student-centered approach to an individual's experience, but we can work on groups of students who may have characteristics in common. The other caveat, I guess, of the student-centered support model is the needs in terms of funding. costing for some of these supports. Something like childcare, funding for accommodation, etc. So there are costs involved in a student-centered approach, which is always worth mentioning. When we're talking about support for students, it's important to remember the types and the availability of support. We have 6 types of support available: proactive, which we know, preventive, responsive, supportive, enriching, and emergency support. And these 6 types of support may intertwine, they may interlink. It may be that students are in need of proactive support in some areas, but supportive support in other areas. And so it might seem like the types of support that we are offering are strenuous for us as academics and as support for students and staff. But it's important to know that it is only when we are proactive and preventive and responsive and supportive and enriching, and we have emergency support, that we can address some of those complexities of a diverse student population. The availability, or the categories of availability that have been identified in our student success framework, is on demand, so services that are always available, the services that are structured and planned or called programmatic, and our high care services. And the reason why I'm mentioning all of this today is because I do think with the presentations coming, it is worth bearing some of this in mind, some of these frameworks and policies in mind. I think overall we can all agree, even before yesterday, but strengthened through yesterday's interactions, that student success is everyone's responsibility. It isn't just the responsibility of university teachers or the responsibility of support services or the responsibility of students. We all need to work together. And one of the ways we are taking student success a step further, I guess, at the institution is through the development of the next 5-year learning and teaching plan. This plan will guide our vision. It'll be in place to support both students and staff. And in many ways, it is aspirational. It does speak to how we wish to prepare our students for their futures as opposed to our pasts. And I'm almost done. And I won't go into too much detail here because I'm sure many of you have been part of the many roadshows that we've been doing on the new learning and teaching plan. But just to remind everyone of the 6 pillars or focus areas of the next plan. How we, in this plan, see supporting and recognizing university teachers as linked to and iterative with the other focus areas of harnessing technology, of harnessing our physical and our virtual environment, of strengthening data-driven student success, driving curriculum design for student engagement and lifelong learning, as well as empowering students as self-directed learners. With these focus areas in place, we are supporting student success and university achievement, if you will, through reiterating some of the focuses in the 2033 goals. So when we have in our goals for WITS 2033, our students, staff, and alumni feel a sense of belonging to an institution of which they are proud. This is central to the learning and teaching experience that students have when they are here. It was wonderful to hear the students speak with pride about the education that they've received, about the guidance that they've received. That's part of our goals as the institution. Another goal that I picked out of the framework is that our curriculum meet the changing needs of our society and the world, with our students benefiting from our expanded learning spaces and opportunities. This particular goal, I think, speaks directly to all 6 of our learning and teaching focus areas for the next 5 years. Our academic staff development programs are institutionalized and globally recognized for promoting effective teaching, practice, and student success. This is a fundamental goal in the WITS 2033 strategy, and I think through supporting and recognizing university teachers, through supporting and empowering our students, as well as through our curricular design, we will achieve this goal, as well as the overall goal of the 2033, which is to make WITS a thriving university. In conclusion, colleagues, I'd like to just add that I believe when students and staff succeed, the institutions succeed. And this came through, I think, a little bit in what Professor Francois was saying yesterday about the need for everyone to work together to define what success is for an institution to succeed. The effort to achieve our goals and nurture academic success through an improved student learning and teaching experience is a team effort, and we see that through the number of people attending this conference. I see we have 87 people today. This is fantastic. This is showing a team effort to be reflexive, to be agile. The work that we are talking about and the papers that you have written and are presenting are bold. We are here to listen. We are also excited to embrace the change in learning and teaching that we will see over the next 5 and 10 years. To celebrate diversity in the classroom is important, and to be inclusive in the classrooms. And again, I guess if I can add to Professor Osman's challenge to us yesterday, is maybe to ask and challenge everyone to be aspirational in learning and teaching. It is difficult given the constraints. It is difficult given workloads and given other types of activities that may be time consuming. But what can we do that is aspirational? And I guess my question to this conference and to all the people attending is, are we aspirational, or have we lost a little bit of that along the way? Overall, I believe that as graduates of WITS University, we are not preparing students to be employers. We're not preparing our students just to be employed, but we are preparing and creating employers. We are preparing graduates who will be job creators and who will be leaders on the continent. So my final question then is, are we doing this? Or are we just preparing students for employment? Thank you all very much for the time. Nezuko, I've stopped sharing my screen. And I look forward to the rest of the discussions today and the presentations. And I really appreciate, once again, the CLTD for bringing us all together for these important presentations, discussions. And thank you again very much.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that thought-provoking talk. There is one on the chat. I'm just gonna read it. Sorry, Prof, it just came through now. But colleagues, if you've got a question, we've got about 10 minutes to ask Prof any questions. If you might have the comment on the chat, Prof, I don't know if you can see it.
I can, so it's a long one. Najma, do you maybe want to come in and ask it? It might be easier.
Okay, good morning, everyone. And first of all, thank you for this wonderful presentation. It is indeed thought-provoking. I wanted to simply ask from the presenter. It is really key and very important, as well as it's part of something I was thinking as well to highlight. We indeed should focus on producing the minds and the problem solvers of tomorrow in a way that, rather than preparing them for employment only, why not to ensure that they are going to be a jobs maker or producers. But I do not know if you have more details or something tangible that you can bring to the panel, what really can be done specifically on that aspect, that our education system will help our students to be job makers rather than seekers. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. Sorry, we didn't get your name. It's not showing on the system.
Oh, my name is January Rossi.
January. Okay.
January. You can say January. It's okay.
January. Okay. Thank you
Yes,
very,
yes.
very much for that question.
Okay.
Prof,
Okay.
would you like
Thank
to?
you. Thank you, January Hossi. I appreciate the question. And I think, there isn't a simple, this is how you do it, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. But I do believe that with the skills base of university teachers, with the continuous professional learning of university teachers, working with students, which I think came through very strongly yesterday, hearing students as partners in their learning and in their academic journey, if you will. I think that within the process of collaboration, within the process of listening and hearing, that we are able to figure out and plot a way forward for our students to be more than just employed, but to be employers. So if I think about an example of what is happening in digital technologies for the moment. Our students are incredibly savvy. Some of them have excellent ideas. Some of them are very innovative in how they are using things like social media. And so we do need to embrace and work with them rather than stick to this is the 20-year-old curriculum. I'm going to teach this because this is what was taught in 1980, and see how we can build on it to really embrace the new thoughts and the new voices in the room. So, Mr. or Dr. Hussey, I hope that helps.
Yes, it does indeed. And hope, I don't know, you will be also attending tomorrow, because this could be extending a little of my presentation for tomorrow. I guess we overlap somewhere there. Thank you so much.
Definitely, I will be there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Laura, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. And Nicole, thank you for drawing our attention also to that important interrelationship between student, staff, and curriculum development, and to responsibility sharing. I think that's so important. But the question I have, I know we've been talking now, for many years about wanting to promote teaching and learning more, the value of teaching and learning in the institution. And the relationship between policy and practice, and I think I think the process of this new teaching and learning plan has been very useful in really getting feedback and focusing on different stakeholders' participation in putting it together. But how do we work with policies not just as texts, which they often are, and really see them in a more multi-layered way, as more focus on the processes of implementation, and have a much closer integration with practices, with teaching practices, and even research and research practices, because I think we're all aware that at times there is a kind of a poor alignment between the policies and the practices. So I just wondered if you have any ideas about that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Laura. And I think this is something we all struggle with, right? I think it all comes back to the environment in which we're working in. And sometimes it feels as if the environment can be either restricted by the policies or embraced by the policies. For me, and I can only speak from a personal experience on this, I think it's really about two things. One is understanding what policy is and understanding what specific policies have to say. And then it's about also knowing that policies can and do change when there is need. What I find is that we don't engage enough with the second aspect. We tend to take the policies as, oh, this is restrictive, I can't work within this, therefore the practice won't follow, rather than challenging policy and saying, well, this policy is restricting our thinking on X, Y, and Z, so the policy needs to change. And I'm glad that Professor Diane Grayson is with us, because this is one of the big lessons that I've learned from her this year, is that policy can and should be challenged. We know this. But policy can and should also be read and translated, I guess, within our schools and within our faculties. We should really understand what is the policy saying and what can we do within the policy, and where there is or where there are restrictions, how can I challenge a policy to be able to have an implementable practice that ensures something like student success. It's not an easy thing to do. I know no one loves sitting and reading policy documents. I know I don't love sitting and reading policy documents. But when I do take the time, I do find that in many cases, and this might just be, again, my own experience with the policies I've encountered at WITS, there is room and scope for practice to be implemented in very customizable and specific ways within the institution. So, Laura, I think, if I may, the short answer to your question is taking the time to read and understand the policies, but also taking the time to challenge the policies. And Chair, if I may, I would like to invite Professor Grayson in to just comment on this point, please, because I do think she's had a lot more experience in this area than I have.
Thanks, Nicole. And yeah, I mean, I think you're making really good points. So maybe maybe an additional point to the good points Nicole's already made. The development of policies that affect teaching and learning and staff professional learning and student success, all of those that we've developed in the last 6.5 years, the process of developing them has been extremely inclusive and participatory. Not to say, however, as Nicole has just mentioned, that they shouldn't continue to be challenged and continue to be updated. But I think maybe to take what she's said one step further, I'm wondering whether and Laura, I'm thinking about, I know you were tremendously involved in the implementation of the youth assessment standing orders. I'm wondering whether it shouldn't be part of the brief of various committees and structures within faculties and within schools to take it upon themselves, or to be expected even, to be familiar with relevant policies and standing orders that affect their work. So, for example, the assessment standing orders, we expected that every school and every faculty would be conversant with those by the time they came into play in 2023. Now, we know that that didn't actually happen, but maybe if we're talking about agency, maybe there needs to be greater agency on the part of schools and academics within schools and faculties to take responsibility for looking and saying, what are the frameworks, the standing orders, the policies that are meant to guide and enable and strengthen and improve the quality of our practices. So, I'd be interested to hear whether that makes any kind of sense. Thanks.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Diane.
much. Thanks, Prof. And thanks, Prof. Grayson. I know from our school, the engineering, they do that. In the teaching and learning committee, they do look at the policies, especially the standing orders. There was a session where we just went through the assessment policy. Thank you so much for that. And we've got a bit of time for Najma to come in. Najma, please, would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
I think Najma she responded in the chat, Chair, that it was a reflection that she was thinking to self, but also to everyone.
Perfect. Any last words, Prof? We've got like 2 minutes.
Nothing from my side, Chair. Just once again, thanks very much to everyone for the time, for the comments and the questions, and I look forward to the rest of the day. Thank you very much.